Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take complex information, stack up the sources, and distill them into the most important nuggets of knowledge you need to be truly well-informed.
Great to be here.
For analytical minds like yours, the health of democracy isn't just some abstract political debate. It's a complex, living system, a grand experiment, and right now, well, it's undeniably under significant stress.
It really is.
So how do we move beyond that vague sense of anxiety, that gut feeling that something's off, and arrive at a clear, actionable understanding of its true condition?
That's precisely our mission today. We're embarking on an in-depth exploration, a deep dive into safeguarding U.S. democracy, a field guide to backsliding.
Okay.
We've pulled from an extensive array of sources, independent watchdog reports, rigorous scholarly assessments, real-time legal filings, and expert analyses. Our core objective is to equip you, our listener, with concrete diagnostic signs of democratic erosion. We want to help you map out plausible futures for the U.S., understand the subtle behavioral clues of manipulation, and ultimately provide you with a practical cheat sheet for defending democracy in your own observations.
That's incredibly powerful. This isn't just about absorbing information, it's about empowering you with informed observation and critical thinking.
Exactly.
To navigate this complex terrain, we've structured our deep dive into clear, logical chapters designed to appeal to that part of your mind that craves patterns, logic, and comprehensive understanding.
Makes sense.
We'll begin by grounding ourselves in the current state of U.S. democracy and global trends, giving you a quantitative baseline. Then we'll dive into a detailed cheat sheet of red flags for democratic backsliding, the concrete symptoms to watch for.
Right.
After that, we'll dissect the populist manipulation playbook, identifying the insidious behavioral patterns that erode trust and divide society. And because we want to think systematically, we'll project into plausible future scenarios for America at different time horizons, 10, 20, 50, and even 100 years out.
And crucially, we won't leave you with just a diagnosis. The final and perhaps most vital section will equip you with actionable, nonpartisan steps you can take to fortify democratic institutions.
Okay.
We're going to give you the data points, the patterns, and perhaps most importantly, the so what.
So let's start with what the numbers are actually telling us. It's one thing to feel like American democracy is in trouble, but the data, when you look at it, quantifies it in a striking way.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The undeniable reality is that the United States has experienced measurable erosion in political freedoms over the past decade. This isn't anecdotal, it's the finding of nonpartisan watchdogs like Freedom House.
Right, Freedom House. They're well respected.
Very much so. They provide concrete metrics, and their assessment is quite sobering. They downgraded the U.S. Freedom Score from an impressive 94 out of 100 back in 2010.
94? Wow.
Yeah, pretty high. All the way down to 83 out of 100 by 2020.
That's a big drop, 11 points.
It is. And what's particularly striking when you dig into their data is the sharp 6-point drop that occurred specifically during Donald Trump's first term.
6 points just in those 4 years.
Exactly. That's a rapid decline for an established democracy.
A 6-point drop in just 4 years is a significant shift for a country with such deep-rooted democratic traditions. What specific areas did Freedom House flag for reform that led to this downgrade?
Well, they explicitly cited the need to address several critical areas. Removing barriers to voting, for one.
Okay.
Limiting the influence of money in politics, that's another big one.
Always a concern.
And establishing independent redistricting commissions.
Yeah.
Gerrymandering, basically.
Right. So why are these specific areas so critical? For someone thinking analytically, what makes them key indicators?
Okay, great question. Barriers to voting, for instance, aren't just an inconvenience, right?
Okay.
They can systematically disenfranchise segments of the population, fundamentally undermining the principle of universal suffrage, which is bedrock.
Undermines the whole idea of equal representation.
Exactly. The influence of money in politics, meanwhile, can distort representation, making the voices of ordinary citizens feel less impactful than those with deep pockets. It erodes that one person, one vote ideal.
Sure.
And gerrymandering, or non-independent redistricting, allows political parties to manipulate electoral outcomes by drawing district lines purely to their advantage. This effectively predetermines results, making elections less competitive and, crucially, less reflective of the actual popular will. These are really significant structural weaknesses.
And Freedom House isn't the only organization sounding this alarm, are they?
Not at all. The Economist's Democracy Index, another highly respected source, reinforces this assessment. They've rated the U.S. as a flawed democracy since 2016.
Flawed democracy. That's quite a label.
It is. It certainly gives pause. And in 2021, the U.S. hit its lowest score ever on their index, 7.85 out of 10.
Wow.
And their specific concerns really resonated with Freedom House's findings, highlighting issues with basic government functionality and pervasive political polarization. It's a consistent message across different indices.
So if we were to verbally describe a democracy health monitor dashboard for the listener, these indices would be our key gauges, right?
Exactly.
What exactly does this flawed democracy status signify? How is it different from a full democracy or, say, an authoritarian regime?
Okay, think of it like this. Maybe like a chronic illness for the body politic. On our democracy health monitor, a flawed democracy isn't a sudden, acute heart attack. It's more like the slow, almost imperceptible hardening of the arteries. It indicates significant structural weaknesses and vulnerabilities that prevent the system from being fully functional or, robust. The insidious danger here isn't necessarily immediate collapse,
Right.
but its ability to normalize erosion. It means that while basic democratic procedures like elections might still occur, there are serious issues impacting things like civil liberties, political culture, government functionality, and political participation. These prevent it from being a fully healthy, consolidated democracy.
So it's still running, but not well.
Precisely. It's a system under strain, operating below its optimal capacity, and really susceptible to further, potentially irreversible erosion if these underlying issues aren't addressed. Each degradation, especially when it becomes normalized, makes the next one less shocking and, frankly, harder to reverse.
That distinction is incredibly important. It's not a binary switch, on or off.
Not at all. It's a spectrum.
And this isn't just an American problem, is it? It sounds like what we're seeing here is part of a larger global trend.
That's a crucial insight. It really puts our situation into context. The backsliding trend observed in the U.S. is not isolated. It's part of a broader, frankly, quite worrying international pattern.
Okay.
According to Freedom House's comprehensive Freedom in the World report, 2023 marked the 18th consecutive year of global democratic decline.
18 years, that's almost 2 decades.
Almost 2 decades of net decline globally. Think about that. This isn't just an abstract statistic. It has real human impact. In that year alone, political rights and civil liberties declined in 52 countries.
52 countries in 1 year.
Affecting, they estimate, 20% of the world's population directly. In stark contrast, only 21 countries showed any improvement. It's a pervasive worldwide phenomenon.
So it's not a few isolated incidents, but a widespread systemic shift. What are the common threads? What are the key global drivers behind this downturn that we see across different national contexts?
There are clear, recurring patterns that political scientists observe globally. The common drivers of this global downturn include incumbents manipulating elections to stay in power.
Okay, rule rigging.
Exactly. Actively attacking pluralism, meaning the diversity of opinions and groups within society, which they often see as a threat to their monolithic control.
Right, demonizing opposition.
Yes. And crucially, leveraging crises, things like conflicts, economic downturns, or even pandemics, to tighten their grip on power and justify increasingly authoritarian measures, usually under the guise of stability or national security.
Using emergencies as an excuse.
Pretty much, yeah.
And here's where the U.S. situation becomes particularly poignant, almost ironic. Historically, we've often been seen as a beacon, largely exporting democratic ideals and principles to the world.
That was the narrative, certainly.
Now, we're unequivocally experiencing democratic erosion at home, placing the U.S. squarely within this stark global trend rather than standing as an exception.
Indeed. It signals a profound shift in the global landscape where even established, seemingly robust democracies are proving vulnerable. It's a sobering thought, frankly.
It really is. And when we talk about democratic erosion in the U.S., a significant part of the conversation inevitably centers on Donald J. Trump's presidency. Experts have largely identified his time in office as an era of unprecedented norm breaking. What does that mean in practical terms?
It's a foundational point in any contemporary assessment of American democracy. You can't really avoid it. A scholarly assessment in 2022 meticulously details specific actions taken during his presidency from 2017 to 2021 and, by extension, the current 2025 onward period.
Right.
These actions included systematically undermining public trust in elections through baseless, false claims of widespread fraud, That's a big one.
The stolen election narrative.
Precisely. He actively encouraged political violence, notably before and during the January 6th insurrection. He relentlessly vilified the mainstream media, branding it fake and the enemy of the people, eroding a vital check on power.
Undermining accountability.
Absolutely. Furthermore, he consciously positioned himself as a law and order strongman, explicitly targeting immigrants and protesters. This is a characteristic really common to leaders who seek to consolidate power through fear and division, not through democratic consensus.
And it's those last points that really draw direct parallels to authoritarian leaders we've seen elsewhere in the world, isn't it? The playbook seems eerily similar.
Absolutely. These behaviors are far more typical of authoritarian leaders abroad than of a president operating within the established boundaries of a liberal democracy. The tangible effects of these actions are evident in the downgrades we've already discussed. Multiple democracy indices lowered their assessment of the U.S. during and after Trump's first term. For instance, in 2021, the International IDEA think tank, a highly respected intergovernmental organization for the first time ever, listed the U.S. as a backsliding democracy.
First time ever for the U.S.
First time ever. They cited the direct fallout from the 2020 election and specifically the January 6th insurrection as key factors in that reclassification.
This brings us to a critical concept we hear a lot, democratic norms.
Right.
We often hear this term, but what exactly are they and why are they so vital for a system to function beyond just codified laws?
That's a great question because it's fundamental. Democratic norms are essentially the unwritten rules, the informal expectations, and the shared understandings that guide behavior within a democratic system.
Okay, the unwritten rules.
Yeah. They are the essential soft guardrails that allow a system to function smoothly and predictably, even beyond what is strictly codified in law. Think about things like the expectation that a losing candidate will concede an election gracefully and facilitate a peaceful transfer of power.
Right. That's not usually written down anywhere explicitly.
Exactly. Or the norm that political opponents won't use the levers of government to punish each other, through investigations or something. They act as the crucial lubrication in the sophisticated machine of democracy.
Lubrication. I like that analogy.
When these norms are consistently broken, the system starts to lose its coherence and effectiveness. And what's particularly worrying is that once these soft guardrails are eroded or outright shattered, they are incredibly difficult to restore.
Why is that?
Because they rely on mutual trust, good faith, and a shared commitment to the system itself, which are precisely the things undermined by norm-breaking behavior. It's hard to rebuild that trust once it's gone.
So it's not just about what's legal, but what's expected to keep the system healthy. And it seems that the U.S. is facing a deeply fragmented reality right now, largely driven by intense political polarization.
That's a fundamental truth, unfortunately. The United States is deeply polarized, and this polarization extends to fundamental perceptions of democracy itself. It's not just about policy disagreements anymore.
It goes deeper.
Much deeper. It's about a profound divergence in how different groups interpret reality, factual evidence, and the integrity of the system itself. Ahead of the 2024 election, for instance, we saw majorities of both Democrats and Republicans voicing fears about American democracy backsliding.
Okay, so both sides were worried.
Yes, but crucially, for wildly different reasons, which really highlights the depth of this divide.
Can you elaborate on those divergent fears? What were Democrats primarily concerned about, and what was the focus for Republicans?
Sure. For most Democrats, their alarm stemmed directly from the prospect of a second Trump term and its potential authoritarian tendencies, building on the norm-breaking actions observed during his first administration. They feared further erosion of democratic institutions and principles, a move towards a more autocratic style of governance.
Okay, fear of authoritarianism.
Right. On the other hand, most Republicans, influenced heavily by the Stop the Steal narrative, were convinced, and it must be stated, baselessly, that the real threat to democracy was widespread voter fraud and that Joe Biden's 2020 victory was illegitimate.
So completely different threats perceived.
Completely different perceived threats to democracy. This makes finding a common diagnosis, let alone a common solution, incredibly difficult.
And this election denialism isn't just a fringe belief, it's startlingly widespread, isn't it? The numbers are quite shocking.
They really are. As of 2021, nearly 3 in 10 Americans overall, and a staggering 2/3 of Republicans, believe the baseless claim that Joe Biden was not legitimately elected.
2/3 of Republicans, wow.
This pervasive election denialism is profoundly dangerous for several reasons that go right to the heart of how a democracy functions. Firstly, it creates fertile ground for anti-democratic actors who can exploit this distrust to justify efforts to undermine future elections or even reject legitimate outcomes. It escalates from rhetoric to action.
Right, it gives them cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Secondly, a democracy fundamentally cannot function if significant portions of the population refuse to accept fair electoral losses. If the legitimacy of election results is constantly questioned without evidence, the peaceful transfer of power, which is foundational to any functioning democracy, simply becomes impossible over time.
So the urgent challenge isn't just about policy debates, but about rebuilding a shared understanding of verified facts and basic civic values, a common reality.
Precisely. It's about rebuilding a common reality grounded in independently verified facts and shared civic values. That's absolutely essential for any productive democratic discourse or collaborative problem solving. Without that common ground, dialogue often just evolves into echo chambers and mutual suspicion.
Our system of checks and balances is often lauded as a remarkably robust safeguard, a truly sophisticated piece of political engineering. But it, too, has been under extraordinary strain recently. Where did it show resilience, and where did cracks begin to appear, revealing vulnerabilities we might not have anticipated?
That's a crucial question. The U.S. Constitution's system of checks and balances has indeed faced extraordinary stress tests recently. We saw resilient elements hold up well in certain areas. For instance, the judiciary.
The courts.
The courts repeatedly struck down Trump's unlawful actions, from early versions of the travel ban all the way to his 2025 election executive order. Judges from across the political spectrum appointed by both parties demonstrated a remarkable degree of independence in upholding the law. They acted as a crucial brake on executive overreach.
That's encouraging. Any other areas?
Yes. State and local election officials played a heroic, largely unsung role in 2020. They stood firm against immense pressure to find votes or alter results. They ensured the integrity of the vote counts, demonstrating that often the last line of defense is actually at the local level, with people just doing their jobs correctly.
So some key safeguards, particularly the courts and local administrators, held up. But where did the system show fundamental weaknesses or, arguably, outright fail?
Unfortunately, other guardrails revealed significant cracks. Congress's impeachment power, for example, failed to result in the conviction or removal of Trump twice. This was largely due to hyperpartisanship overriding the fundamental oversight function that impeachment is meant to serve. Instead of a nonpartisan check on power, it essentially became just another partisan battleground. Furthermore, the peaceful transfer of power, long a hallmark of American democracy, was dramatically disrupted by mob violence on January 6th, which was incited by a sitting president, an event that was simply unthinkable just a few years prior.
Unprecedented.
Truly. And perhaps most crucially, the outright defiance of vital, informal norms like precedents, conceding defeat gracefully, and cooperating in the transition of power, highlighted a critical vulnerability. That a system built on good faith can be fundamentally undermined by its absence.
So it's really this intricate interplay of codified law and informal norms that truly defines the system's effectiveness and resilience. It's not enough to have the rules if people stop playing by the unwritten code.
Exactly. The system's safeguards rely not just on the letter of the law, the hard structures, but on good faith adherence to these informal norms, the societal lubrication, if you will.
Right, the lubrication.
When that good faith adherence erodes, even the best designed institutions, those hard legal structures, can be circumvented, paralyzed, or simply ignored.
So the machine jams up.
Precisely. To use that earlier analogy, think of the system of checks and balances as a sophisticated machine with multiple gears and interlocking parts. The laws themselves are the hard metal of the gears, precisely engineered to provide structure and function. However, the recent events reveal that while the hard metal of the gears might still be there, the lubrication, those informal norms and good faith adherence, is drying up. This causes immense friction, grinding, and the potential for the entire system to seize up. It illustrates how its effectiveness depends on far more than just its formal structure. A machine can be perfectly designed, but if the operators refuse to maintain it or deliberately jam it, it will fail.
And this leads us to perhaps the most urgent point of all. Experts widely agree that the United States is at a profound inflection point. The next 6 months to 6 years are described as critical.
This cannot be overstated. To quote the director of VDEM, the Varieties of Democracy Project, which meticulously tracks democracy indicators worldwide.
VDEM, yeah, I know their work.
They stated that as of early 2025, the U.S. was on track to lose its democracy status in 6 months, if then current trends continued.
Now, to clarify for our listeners, that wasn't a literal prediction that we'd instantly become a dictatorship by late 2025, correct? It sounds more like a serious diagnostic warning based on their metrics.
Precisely. It wasn't a hyperbolic prediction of an immediate dictatorship, but rather a stark, data-driven assessment reflecting the rapid and steep deterioration in key indicators that VDEM records.
Like what kind of indicators?
Things like freedom of expression, government censorship efforts, and electoral integrity, all of which were showing alarming declines in their metrics at that time. It underscores how quickly things have deteriorated by comparative global measures, placing the U.S. on a very worrying trajectory.
Okay.
Looking slightly further out, analysts have also warned that the 2024 and 2028 U.S. elections will be determinative for the fate of our democratic system. These aren't just normal elections. They are seen as genuine inflection points for the very structure of our government.
So there's a real window here, either for reversal and renewal or for an entrenchment of these concerning trends. It's not a done deal either way.
That's the crucial concept. A window of opportunity, or perhaps more accurately, a window of risk. If authoritarian-leaning candidates continue winning and entrenching themselves in power, effectively dismantling those soft guardrails we talked about, the window for reversal could indeed close, making it exponentially harder to restore democratic norms and institutions down the line. Conversely, if pro-democracy forces win and successfully enact the necessary reforms, learning from these challenges and building stronger, more explicit guardrails, the U.S. could potentially usher in a new era of democratic resilience.
So the stakes are incredibly high.
Incredibly high. To connect this to your experience, our listener, we are truly living through history right now. The decisions we make as voters, activists, public servants, and leaders in the coming months and years will likely set the course for America's next century. That means your awareness and engagement are not just academic exercises. They matter.
So to quickly recap this foundational first chapter, we've established that U.S. democracy is measurably declining, mirroring a concerning global trend that's been underway for nearly 2 decades.
Right.
This decline has been sharply accelerated by unprecedented norm-breaking behaviors, particularly during the Trump presidency, leading to deep polarization that has fractured our shared reality and strained our checks and balances.
Experts are clear. We are at an urgent inflection point, and the next few years are critical. These aren't just abstract feelings or vague anxieties. These trends are quantifiable, systematic, and demand our serious analytical attention.
Okay, now that we've established the baseline and the global context, let's move to the practical application. How do you, as an informed observer, recognize democratic backsliding in real time?
Right. The cheat sheet.
Exactly. It's not always a sudden coup, right? It's often a slow, incremental process. So we've compiled a cheat sheet of concrete red flags, the diagnostic symptoms to watch for in public discourse and policy.
So if we're looking for the earliest warning signs, what's often the first thing authoritarian-leaning leaders target in a democracy? What's the very first concrete symptom that would tell us things are going off the rails?
Often, the first red flag is a blitz of election rule changes. This isn't just routine election reform we're talking about.
No, it's a rapid, often sweeping implementation of new rules designed either to overtly make voting harder for specific segments of the population or to deliberately skew the process in the ruling party's favor.
Okay, tilting the playing field.
Precisely. We saw a prime example early in Trump's second term. He signed a sweeping executive order in 2025 that attempted to unilaterally require proof of U.S. citizenship to vote and to bar states from counting mail ballots arriving after Election Day.
Right, I remember that. Those were big changes proposed basically overnight.
And attempts to bypass normal legislative processes.
And these moves weren't without immediate pushback, were they? There was an immediate response from the judicial system.
Not at all. Such moves were immediately challenged in court as they clearly overstepped constitutional boundaries. By June 2025, federal judges had enjoined, meaning legally halted core provisions of Trump's order, finding key parts likely unlawful.
So the court stepped in.
They did. And the judicial rationale was incredibly important here for understanding the limits of executive power. As one judge explicitly noted, the U.S. Constitution gives a president no general power over elections. That authority fundamentally lies with Congress or the individual states. This is a critical constitutional principle that these actions tried to circumvent.
So the clearest diagnostic signal here, the telltale sign, is if you observe a flurry of new election laws or orders coming from the executive that courts repeatedly have to strike down as illegal. It's a very clear sign of attempted rule rigging.
Exactly. When a leader tries to unilaterally straighten out elections, bypassing established legislative processes, and then gets repeatedly rebuked by multiple courts for overstepping their constitutional authority, it's a profound diagnostic indicator of democratic backsliding. The fundamental importance of stable, predictable, and nonpartisan election rules for democratic legitimacy cannot be overstated. Imagine trying to play a game where one team can simply change the rules mid-game to ensure their victory.
Yeah, nobody would trust the outcome.
Exactly. It fundamentally undermines fair competition and the very premise of a free and fair election. It corrodes trust.
That makes perfect sense. So it's not just about the rules, but how leaders treat dissenters. What happens when criticism is seen as a threat?
That leads directly to our second red flag: retaliation against critics. This is a core indicator where authoritarians frequently weaponize state power to punish dissent, and the past few years have provided, well, textbook examples.
Okay, like what?
Consider the February 2025 incident where the White House barred Associated Press journalists from the Oval Office and Air Force One.
Right, the AP reporters.
The stated reason: AP refused to adopt Trump's preferred terminology for the Gulf of Mexico.
Seriously, over terminology.
Seriously, this was an obvious petty act of viewpoint-based retaliation. A federal judge later ruled that this ban was pretty clearly unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination, underscoring its illegitimate nature. This wasn't about security. It was purely about control of narrative.
And it wasn't just the press. Private firms and even academia faced similar pressures. It seems to be a broad effort to silence any opposition.
That's right. It spread. Around the same time, Trump moved against private firms and lawyers he deemed hostile. In one instance, he signed an order suspending security clearances for everyone at a major law firm, Paul Weiss.
Suspending security clearances for a whole firm.
And canceling its federal contracts. This was apparently intended to intimidate attorneys involved in investigations of him.
Wow.
He also explicitly targeted academia. When college students protested his policies, Trump threatened to cut off federal funds to universities that allowed illegal protests and even floated expelling or deporting protesters.
You're using the power of the polls.
And disturbingly, he followed through by specifically targeting foreign student speech, issuing executive orders to deport international students involved in campus demonstrations under the banner of combating anti-Semitism, a policy that civil rights groups immediately warned violated free speech principles as it weaponized immigration status to suppress lawful protest.
So the telltale sign here is if a leader uses government levers like funding, contracts, permits, or even immigration status to punish media outlets, political critics, universities, or specific companies. This isn't just strong-arming, it's using the state to silence.
It's a flashing red light for democratic erosion.
Yeah.
Healthy democracies inherently tolerate and even encourage opposing views as part of a vibrant public discourse. They understand that dissent is a vital part of self-correction.
Right.
Embattled democracies, on the other hand, increasingly see those in power using the full force of the state to muzzle opponents and silence criticism. This is a direct attack on the freedom of expression and the freedom of association, which are foundational to any truly democratic society. When the state becomes a tool for vengeance against critics, the system is in deep trouble.
Our third red flag is particularly vivid. Law and order forces turned inward. This means the deployment of military or federal forces against their own population under dubious pretenses. This feels like a direct visual indicator of authoritarian creep.
This is an especially alarming warning sign, and it's something that fundamentally shifts the relationship between the state and its citizens. In summer 2025, for example, Trump took the unprecedented step of sending 2,000 National Guard troops into Los Angeles.
2,000 troops in LA. Why?
This deployment was framed as an effort to crack down on local protests and restore order during immigration raids, an unusual justification for such a significant military presence, which is normally reserved for national emergencies or combat situations.
Right, not local policing.
Even more unsettling, defense officials at the time put U.S. Marines at Camp Pendleton on high alert for possible domestic action, which is considered highly unusual and concerning in America. It really blurs the lines between military and civilian law enforcement roles.
Marines on alert for domestic action. That's chilling.
It is. And this wasn't an isolated incident, was it? It sounds like there was a pattern emerging.
No, it wasn't. Just a couple of months later, Trump federalized Washington, D.C.'s police force and deployed 800 National Guard troops to the Capitol.
Federalized the D.C. police.
Yes. This occurred despite D.C.'s violent crime rates being at historic lows, making the law and order justification appear dubious at best, suggesting a political motivation. His advisors openly discussed doing the same in other Democrat-led cities, using exaggerated rhetoric about roving mobs to justify bypassing local control and normal civilian authority, normalizing the idea of federalizing local law enforcement for political ends.
So we're trying to diagnose this. What's the clearest takeaway for us to watch for? What's the signal?
The clearest indicator is to watch for domestic deployments of soldiers or federal agents in roles normally filled by local police, and especially attempts to normalize these moves as routine.
The normalization is key.
It's absolutely key. In the U.S. context, such deployments are extremely rare outside of genuine, widespread emergencies. For example, the last time a state's National Guard was federalized without its governor's consent was way back during the Civil Rights era. That highlights the extraordinary nature of these actions.
Right, it's not normal. Even without literally firing on citizens, the mere presence of armed forces in a domestic policing role erodes democratic civilian norms and can significantly intimidate legitimate dissent. And as I said, the normalization aspect is crucial. Would-be autocrats actively want you to get used to seeing uniforms patrolling political life and suppressing dissent, thereby eroding the distinction between a military force and a civilian police force. As the ACLU's D.C. director aptly put it during Trump's maneuvers, federalizing local policing is political theater and a blatantly phony justification for abuse of emergency powers. This represents a fundamental shift in the relationship between the state and its citizens.
That's enough to give anyone a whiplash. Okay, the fourth red flag deals with purges of independent civil servants and the push for legal immunity for the powerful. It seems that autocrats, learning from history, understand that lasting control requires removing independent professionals, those who might resist.
This is a critical insight into the long game of authoritarian consolidation. You need loyalists, not independent experts. Yeah. In July 2025, Trump signed an order creating a new Schedule G category of federal employees. This effectively reclassified tens of thousands of civil servants.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, stripping them of their job protections and making them at-will employees who could be fired without cause.
So firing people just because you don't like them?
Or because they might not follow orders blindly. These individuals are typically career experts in policy roles, precisely the people who might resist illegal or unethical orders based on their professional integrity and understanding of the law. The White House openly admitted the goal was to ensure officials carry out the president's priorities or be replaced. This was basically a reboot of his first-term Schedule F scheme.
So this isn't just about efficiency. This is a direct attack on the nonpartisan expertise that keeps the machinery of government running, replacing merit with loyalty.
Absolutely. Such a mass reclassification would let a president sweep out decades of nonpartisan expertise and install loyalists deep across every level of government. It undermines institutional memory, integrity, and the very effectiveness of government services.
And at the same time, there was this push for immunity.
Simultaneously, yes. Trump and his allies pursued novel theories of legal immunity to shield themselves from accountability for past or future actions. In mid-2024, the conservative majority Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling granting former presidents absolute immunity for core official acts.
Absolute immunity.
And at least a presumptive immunity for anything even arguably within their duties. This unprecedented 6-3 decision over liberal dissent effectively threw out charges related to Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election on the theory that those controversial actions were somehow part of his presidential remit.
This sounds like a fundamental challenge to the principle that no one is above the law. What's the clearest indicator for us to watch for here?
The diagnostic signal here is clear. If you see widespread moves to fire or sideline large numbers of apolitical civil servants, or legal arguments cropping up that leaders should be untouchable by prosecution, the rule of law is being fundamentally undermined.
It's a two-pronged attack.
Exactly. Healthy democracies rely on neutral bureaucrats who serve the public, not a political party, and on the bedrock principle that no one is above the law. When you instead hear rhetoric about a deep state of hacks and radicals that must be cleansed, combined with sweeping immunity for top officials, it's a clear indication that the checks on arbitrary power are eroding and accountability is being systematically dismantled.
And the final red flag for recognizing backsliding focuses on the erosion of independent justice, particularly through selective prosecutions and pardons. This seems like a more subtle internal hollowing out of anti-corruption mechanisms, eroding trust from within.
That's a very perceptive way to put it. It's indeed a subtler but equally telling sign that the rule of law is being undermined from the inside. Over Trump's second term, the Justice Department's storied public integrity section, a unit specifically created after the Watergate scandal to prosecute corruption by public officials, was systematically decimated.
Decimated at how?
By mid-2025, its staff had been slashed from over 30 attorneys down to just 5, and its ability to even open new cases was suspended.
Suspended so they couldn't even investigate.
Pretty much neutered. Even more alarming, Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, suspended the critical rule requiring local federal prosecutors to consult public integrity before charging any politicians.
Why was that rule there in the first place?
This rule existed precisely to prevent politically motivated cases, ensuring a layer of nonpartisan review at the central DOJ level. Removing it meant partisan appointees in U.S. attorneys' offices could now prosecute, or conversely, choose not to prosecute public figures at their sole discretion without that crucial oversight.
That truly sounds like the politicization of the justice system, making it a tool of power rather than an impartial arbiter.
It absolutely is. As a former DOJ official warned at the time, we are talking about the politicization of the justice system. The rule of law is endangered.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, Trump wielded the pardon power in a manner that overtly protected allies and undercut anti-corruption efforts. In just the first half of 2025, he issued at least 4 pardons to individuals who had been convicted in public integrity section cases, effectively nullifying the painstaking work of those prosecutors.
Undoing their convictions.
Exactly. While the White House spun these as victims of a politicized DOJ, the reality was often that these were political allies or officials convicted of defrauding the public. This pattern also included granting blanket clemency to those involved in the January 6th Capitol attack on his behalf.
So the diagnostic signal here is if anti-corruption investigators are being fired, sidelined, or stripped of authority, and if pardons or legal favors are flowing disproportionately to political cronies.
Yes, this signals that accountability is being replaced by impunity. In a functioning democracy, officials who break the law fear punishment and expect to be held accountable. In a backsliding regime, they increasingly expect a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right.
When you observe a consistent pattern of prosecute the enemy, spare the ally, it is a definitive sign that Lady Justice's blindfold has slipped and her scales are tilted. This is a dangerous omen for the rule of law, indicating that justice is no longer applied impartially, but is instead a tool of political power.
Okay, that was a lot of crucial information. Let's quickly recap these 5 key red flags of democratic backsliding for our listeners. First, watch for a blitz of election rule changes that courts frequently have to strike down. Second, be alert for retaliation against critics, where government levers are used to punish media, businesses, universities, or individuals for dissent.
Right.
Third, the shocking sight of law and order forces turned inward, with domestic military or federal deployments becoming normalized.
A very visible one.
Fourth, a purge of independent civil servants, combined with legal immunity for the powerful.
Loyalty over expertise and impunity.
And fifth, the subtle but insidious erosion of independent justice through selective prosecutions and pardons. These are concrete symptoms that move us beyond vague vibes to a systematic breakdown that you can actually point to.
Exactly. Observable, specific actions. Okay, moving beyond the policy changes and the structural shifts, it's also absolutely critical to recognize the behavioral indicators of an authoritarian populist leader.
The playbook, right?
The playbook. These aren't just personality quirks. They are deliberate tactics of manipulation that citizens can learn to spot in real time, almost like recognizing a particular chess opening. And Donald Trump has consistently employed these classic tactics.
So what's the first tactic in this populist playbook? It sounds like it involves undermining the very foundations of shared reality.
That's it. You hit it exactly. The first behavioral indicator is delegitimizing truth in institutions. The core tactic here is to relentlessly sow distrust in any source of authority or information except the leader himself.
Only I can tell you the truth.
Precisely. Trump consistently attacked the integrity of U.S. elections, promoting the baseless fraud lie about 2020. He declared mainstream media fake and openly labeled them the enemy of the people, eroding a vital check on power. He even dismissed crime statistics and court rulings that contradicted his preferred narrative.
Right.
This reflex to tell supporters, believe me, not your eyes, not the experts, or what you're seeing and hearing is not what's happening, is a hallmark of populist strongmen across the globe.
It's classic gaslighting on a national scale.
It really is. The diagnostic signal here is to be acutely alert when a leader claims that everyone else is lying and that only they possess the real, unvarnished truth. This tactic fundamentally undermines rational debate and critical thought. Because If there's no shared foundation of facts or trusted institutions, democratic discourse becomes impossible, and the public becomes entirely reliant on the leader's pronouncements.
And closely related to that, something we see consistently is the tactic of scapegoating and divide and conquer. It seems designed to create clear us versus them lines.
Yes, this is a core tactic. Routinely vilifying minority groups and opponents to stoke fear and channel public anger, often distracting from other issues or failures.
Pointing fingers.
Exactly. Trump has frequently portrayed immigrants, refugees, and foreign students as dangerous fifth columns, as seen when he branded student protesters as anti-Semitic hate mongers to justify policies aimed at deporting them.
Right, connecting protest with foreign threats.
Similarly, in his speeches, Democratic-led cities are consistently painted as lawless war zones, implicitly blaming their often diverse populations for crime and disorder. This us versus them framing is designed to harden tribal loyalties, creating a sense of shared grievance and solidarity among his supporters against a common externalized enemy.
Pitting groups against each other.
The diagnostic signal is clear. When you hear blanket attacks on entire communities, whether by race, religion, city, or profession, that's a manipulator trying to pit citizens against each other, rather than addressing real societal issues or taking responsibility for policy failures. The psychological impact of scapegoating is to distract from genuine problems by externalizing blame. It creates an emotional outlet for anger that prevents rational discussion or problem solving. It's a classic misdirection.
The third behavioral indicator presents a fascinating, almost contradictory paradox: self-victimization and a hero complex. The leader simultaneously positions themselves as both the nation's savior and a persecuted victim. How does this dual narrative work?
It is indeed a fascinating yet dangerous paradox of populist rhetoric. Trump consistently casts himself as both savior and victim. He makes sweeping claims that he alone can fix America's problems. I will restore law and order. I will clean out Washington, positioning himself as the sole solution, the indispensable figure.
It's a strong man.
Right. Simultaneously, he claims that a shadowy cabal is persecuting him for his efforts to help the people. It could be the deep state, the media, political opponents.
The elites are out to get me because I'm fighting for you.
That's the line, exactly. By presenting himself as the unique voice of the real people under attack by corrupt elites, he then justifies extreme norm-breaking measures in the name of the people's defense.
So the victimhood justifies the strongman tactics.
Precisely. For example, his administration statement defending the purges in the Justice Department asserted it was ending the weaponization of government, effectively turning the accusation back on his own investigators and critics. This inversion, I'm not breaking norms, I'm saving the nation from enemies within, is a key propaganda technique that reframes authoritarian actions as necessary heroic deeds. The diagnostic signal here is, if a leader constantly claims to be above the rules because he's uniquely fighting for you, alarm bells should ring. This dual narrative mobilizes supporters by creating a sense of shared grievance and a desperate need for a powerful protector, making them far more tolerant of norm-breaking behavior as it's framed as a necessary evil to achieve a greater good.
And finally, the fourth indicator, one that feels like a bright-line rule that should never be crossed in a democracy, overtly or tacitly encouraging violence or intimidation.
It is a critical, unambiguous warning sign. You really need to pay close attention to whether a politician tacitly or overtly endorses political violence. Trump has done so repeatedly throughout his career.
We've seen examples.
Many. From telling rally crowds in 2016 to knock the crap out of protesters, to glorifying the January 6 rioters as patriots, to recently suggesting the police should get very violent with protesters, stating, "They spit, we hit," regarding immigration demonstrators.
It's chilling rhetoric.
It is fundamentally not normal discourse in a democracy, where arguments are settled through debate and ballots, not threats and fists. The diagnostic signal is unambiguous. When a leader winks at or welcomes violence against opponents, it's a bright-line warning of an authoritarian impulse.
It crosses a fundamental line.
Absolutely. Leaders committed to democracy unequivocally renounce violence and call for peaceful discourse. Those flirting with autocracy, however, find excuses for violence, normalize it, or even implicitly encourage it. This has a profoundly corrosive effect on civil society and democratic debate, as it replaces reasoned argument with fear and physical intimidation.
So, to summarize this section on populist manipulation, it boils down to this. Be wary of the leader who constantly lies, scapegoats, claims sole authority to fix problems, and eggs on his followers to confront fellow citizens. Donald Trump's rhetoric consistently exhibits all of them.
It's a consistent pattern.
Recognizing these patterns early can help inoculate us against their corrosive effects, helping us see beyond the rhetoric to the intent. The advice here is clear. Stick to verifiable facts and uphold the principle that no one is above the law or beyond criticism in a democracy.
Absolutely. Understanding these tactics empowers you to identify them in real time, making you a more resilient and informed observer. It helps you see the game being played.
Okay, now that we've discussed the current state of play and the specific red flags of democratic backsliding and the manipulation tactics, let's look to the future. Where does the United States go from here?
Right. It's crucial to understand that the trajectory isn't set in stone. It profoundly depends on choices made by leaders and citizens alike in the coming years and decades.
So these aren't predictions, but plausible paths.
Exactly. Plausible scenarios. We've sketched 4 of them at roughly 10, 20, 50, and 100-year intervals, assuming that the forces we've described, whether Trumpism or its equivalents, continue to exert significant influence.
Let's start with the nearest horizon, 10 years out, by 2035. What's the central expectation for America's democratic health then, if current trends persist?
By 2035, the central expectation, based on current trends, is that the U.S. could become a precarious hybrid democracy.
Hybrid democracy, what does that look like?
It means it would exist in an unstable equilibrium, neither fully authoritarian nor fully democratic. This situation would likely manifest as significant state-by-state divergence.
So not uniform across the country.
Probably not. Some states might function much as they do now, largely upholding democratic norms and institutions, maybe even strengthening them in pockets as a reaction. However, others, especially those under long-term one-party control, might begin to resemble semi-authoritarian enclaves.
What would that entail?
Things like heavily gerrymandered legislatures that guarantee outcomes, actively suppressed opposition through targeted voting restrictions, and an increasingly partisan local administration of elections. Nationally, formal institutions like elections and courts would still exist, but their guardrails would be significantly weaker and more permeable to political influence.
So the structures are there, but weakened.
Right. We can anticipate that the judiciary will have struck down the most egregious abuses of power, similar to how courts enjoined Trump's unlawful election orders. That probably prevents a complete, overt descent into dictatorship. But the attacks on the system would likely continue.
So not an outright authoritarian takeover, but a persistent, almost normalized weakening of democratic mechanisms. The system still technically functions, but in a degraded state.
Exactly. And crucially, many autocratic tools will have been normalized.
Normalized? How so?
For instance, deploying federal forces for domestic security, which was an extraordinary, shocking event back in 2025, might no longer shock the public after a decade of sporadic use. It could become ordinary by 2035, just another tool in the executive arsenal.
People get used to it.
People get used to it. Similarly, politically motivated prosecutions, or the purging of civil servants, initially met with public uproar, could occur more routinely, each instance raising less widespread public concern as the public becomes desensitized. The overall vibe would be a democracy on the brink. Free elections would still happen, and the opposition could still win some fights, but the playing field would be markedly uneven, tilted, and the risk of reversion to outright authoritarianism would be ever present, lurking beneath the surface.
Always vulnerable.
Always vulnerable. In political science terms, the U.S. might score as a flawed or hybrid regime, its status consistently contested in each election cycle, never fully settling back into robust democracy.
You used an analogy earlier about a car. How would that apply here?
Yeah, think of our democracy as a classic high-performance car. In a fully functioning state, all parts are new, well-oiled, working in perfect sync. A hybrid regime, however, is like that same classic car, but with some essential parts rusted, some warning lights permanently on, and maybe a few non-essential parts removed altogether.
Okay.
It's still capable of moving, but it's unstable, unreliable, and prone to breaking down. It illustrates the inherent precariousness and the constant effort required just to keep it on the road. It's running, but barely, and could fail at any moment.
That analogy of the car with rusted parts really drives home the precariousness. Now let's project further out to 20 years, to the mid-2040s. This sounds like a critical fork in the road, where the path becomes much clearer one way or the other.
Indeed. By the mid-2040s, 2 very different futures could unfold, representing a critical fork in the road.
What's the best-case scenario?
The best-case scenario, the profound shock and sustained pressure of the 2020s and 2030s, prompts a broad, cross-partisan coalition of Americans to enact serious reforms that re-entrench democracy.
A course correction.
A conscious course correction. This would mean meaningful bipartisan action to protect voting rights, explicitly depoliticize justice, and ensure accountability regardless of party affiliation. For instance, if Republicans and Democrats who truly value the rule of law and constitutional order come together to restore norms, akin to how political opponents in other countries sometimes unite to oust an authoritarian leader, putting country over party.
Like a democracy-first coalition.
Exactly. Then the U.S. could experience a democratic retrenchment. This might involve civil service protections being codified more strongly than ever, special safeguards added for election certification and the peaceful transfer of power, and a comprehensive restoration of checks and balances with new guardrails specifically learned from the experiences of the Trump era, ensuring such challenges are less likely to recur.
So a conscious collective effort to pull back from the brink and strengthen the system based on lessons learned. But there's also the worst-case scenario.
Yes. In the worst-case scenario, if these crucial reforms don't materialize, if polarization continues to deepen or even worsens, the U.S. continues down the path of what scholars call competitive authoritarianism.
Competitive authoritarianism, what does that mean?
In this outcome, America in 2045 would look more like Orban's Hungary or Erdogan's Turkey nations, where elections are technically held and an opposition technically exists.
So it looks like a democracy on the surface.
On the surface, yes. But the deck is so heavily stacked in favor of the ruling faction that genuine contestation is severely limited. This involves one-party dominance entrenched at the federal level through things like extreme gerrymandering, pervasive control over media narratives, either through state-owned media or through systemic pressure on independent outlets.
Control the information flow.
And a judiciary that is largely captured, reliably greenlighting the ruling party's agenda. Dissenting voices, whether in civil society, the press, or business, would face systematic pressure. They wouldn't necessarily be outright banned because you want to preserve that democratic facade.
The appearance matters.
Right, but they would face lawsuits, tax audits, regulatory harassment, and public vilification designed to keep them in check and prevent them from gaining significant traction or challenging the regime effectively.
So constant pressure, constant intimidation.
Exactly. In short, by 2045, America either pulls back from the brink and consciously renews its democratic promise, or it settles into a managed pseudo-democracy where the formal structures of Republican government persist, but the substance of genuine self-governance, the ability for the people to truly choose their leaders and hold them accountable, is largely gone. Unfortunately, this latter tilted playing field scenario is very plausible if current trends go uncorrected.
So by 2045, we either reestablish a true robust democracy or settle into a system that merely gives the appearance of one, but without its true spirit. Now, looking even further ahead, 50 years out to 2075, what are the divergent legacies we might see then, depending on which path we take in the next couple of decades?
Half a century from now, around 2075, the long-term consequences of our choices will be deeply entrenched, shaping the very character of the nation.
What does the optimistic future look like?
If the U.S. manages to course correct in the coming decade, in that retrenchment scenario we talked about, then by 2075, we can imagine a country that has recommitted to liberal democracy and successfully maintained it.
Okay.
In this optimistic future, the chaos and near breakdowns of the early 21st century would be remembered as a close call, a profound challenge that ultimately inspired necessary systemic reforms, perhaps similar to how the post-Watergate era led to lasting institutional changes like campaign finance reforms and new ethics rules. The democratic equilibrium would have been restored and possibly even strengthened, with new, robust norms against things like refusing a peaceful transfer of power or using the military for political purposes, making such actions unthinkable again.
So democracy renewed and reinforced. And the opposite legacy, the consequence if we don't right the ship.
Conversely, if America slips into competitive authoritarianism in the next 10 to 20 years and stays on that trajectory, then by 2075, those authoritarian norms will have hardened into place, becoming the new normal.
Entrenched.
Deeply entrenched. Under a sustained competitive authoritarian regime, the U.S. might still have alternating leaders or parties, but only within a severely constrained and unfair system. Think of it as an entrenched one-and-a-half-party state. Genuine opposition is never fully illegal, but the regime uses every apparatus of the state, the media, the judiciary, election rules, civil service, to ensure it rarely loses true power.
So the outcome is basically predetermined.
Largely, yes. After 50 years, such a system would develop its own immense inertia, its own self-perpetuating mechanisms. A whole generation would grow up never experiencing a truly free democracy, making it exceedingly difficult to spark a return. Political scientists often talk about path dependence.
Path dependence, right.
The longer a country stays on an undemocratic path, the harder it is to break out and return to a democratic one. So by 2075, either the U.S. is securely back on the democratic path, having truly righted the ship, or it's locked into an authoritarian equilibrium that will be incredibly hard to uproot. In the latter case, America might still be called a democracy, but it would be with a wink and an asterisk.
Like Russia today.
Exactly. Much as we refer to Russia as a managed democracy in the Putin era, it's democracy in name only.
Finally, let's zoom out to the furthest horizon, 100 years from now, to 2125. Here, the implications extend far beyond our borders, don't they? America's global role comes into sharp focus.
Absolutely. Looking out a century to 2125, the focus shifts not only on domestic politics, but crucially on America's role in the world. Over the past 100 years, the United States, despite its flaws, has largely been a leading promoter of liberal democratic values on the global stage. Its example, its advocacy, and its foreign policy have often supported democratic transitions and human rights movements.
That's been a core part of its identity.
It has. Now, if the U.S. were to turn inward toward authoritarian governance, history strongly suggests it would no longer champion democracy abroad as vigorously. A coercive, security-focused U.S. might instead prioritize alliances with strongmen and autocratic regimes, striking a very different tone in international bodies, perhaps emphasizing stability and order over liberty and human rights.
So a complete shift in foreign policy focus.
A fundamental shift.
And what would that mean for global democracy at large? Would it be a ripple effect?
It would certainly be a ripple effect, and a profound one. The global democratic density, the proportion of countries that are democratic, could significantly diminish without U.S. support and its, moral authority, however flawed it might have been at times.
Right.
Other democracies might falter, finding themselves without a key international ally, and authoritarian powers would likely gain even greater influence and legitimacy on the world stage, emboldened by the U.S. example.
An authoritarian U.S. normalizes authoritarianism elsewhere.
Exactly. In essence, a United States that has grown comfortable using domestic coercion is highly likely to extort a more illiberal outlook internationally. It would prefer order and stability over the promotion of liberty and human rights, seeing strongly as partners, not problems. Over a century, this could create a dangerous feedback loop. An authoritarian-leaning U.S. helps usher in an authoritarian-leaning world, which in turn normalizes and reinforces authoritarian practices at home.
That's a dark feedback loop. What about the positive scenario?
On the other hand, if the U.S. renews its democratic promise, embracing that future of democratic retrenchment, it could very well lead a 22nd century revival of democratic norms worldwide, much as it arguably did in the aftermath of World War II, when its example was a powerful force for global liberalization.
So still a potential leader for democracy.
Still potential. We must acknowledge that the 100-year forecast is highly speculative, of course. Many other factors like technology, climate change, unforeseen global events will shape that future. But one thing is certain. The United States in 2125 will either be remembered as a bulwark of freedom and a testament to democratic resilience, or as a cautionary tale of how even a nearly 300-year-old democracy can decay. The choices made in the next few years and decades will undoubtedly tip those scales.
To quickly recap these 4 future scenarios for everyone listening, by 2035, we could see a precarious, hybrid democracy with autocratic tools becoming normalized, where the system is degraded but not entirely gone. By the mid-2040s, we'll hit a critical fork in the road, either a genuine democratic renewal through broad reforms and conscious effort, or a slide into competitive authoritarianism, where elections exist but the playing field is heavily tilted.
Right, the crucial choice point.
50 years out, by 2075, these paths would have created profoundly divergent legacies, a recommitted liberal democracy, or an entrenched authoritarian equilibrium very difficult to escape.
Path dependence kicks in.
And a century from now, by 2125, America's trajectory will have had profound global ripple effects, either as a bulwark of freedom or a cautionary tale for the world. These trajectories are not predetermined, they are shaped by choices made today.
That's the key message. Agency matters. Okay, so the scenarios we've discussed, as unsettling as some of them may be, are not destiny. Americans can and must act to change course.
Right. It's not hopeless. So what can be done?
Drawing on lessons from both our current situation and from other democracies that have successfully resisted backsliding, we've identified concrete, nonpartisan reforms and strategies that could help safeguard our republic. These action items focus on reinforcing the guardrails that have proven vulnerable. It's moving from diagnosis to active intervention.
Okay, let's get practical. If we're talking about strengthening the core machinery of government, what's the first actionable step to ensure stability and integrity, particularly for those critical civil servants?
The first actionable step, and it's a really important one, is to legislate protections for career civil servants and watchdogs.
Put it into law.
Put it into law. This is absolutely crucial for insulating the merit-based civil service from politicized purges like Schedule F or G. Congress should pass laws to explicitly close the door on any future Schedule FG-type reclassifications by statute. This ensures that a president cannot unilaterally strip tens of thousands of federal employees of their job protections just on a whim.
Right. Remove that power from the executive.
Exactly. The goal here is to ensure that critical, nonpartisan expertise, from public health experts to economic analysts to diplomats, isn't simply wiped out for political reasons, preserving institutional memory and confidence.
And what about the watchdogs, the inspectors general?
Likewise, we need to significantly strengthen the independence of inspectors general, or IGs. They are the vital internal agency watchdogs tasked with rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Recent proposals, such as requiring that an IG can only be removed for cause and with congressional notification, are an excellent starting point.
Make it harder to fire them for doing their job.
Precisely. In fact, an Inspector General Independence Act was passed in one chamber of Congress back in 2022 with bipartisan support, but unfortunately never became law. It's imperative to revive and enact such measures.
Okay.
These steps would collectively make it significantly harder for any president to fire internal critics and whistleblowers at will. In a healthy democracy, career public servants and IGs act as our collective eyes and ears against corruption and waste, and we must shield them from partisan retribution. An independent, nonpartisan civil service is vital for the functional continuity and integrity of government, acting as a crucial check on executive power.
That makes perfect sense. You need that unbiased expertise insulated from politics. Okay, our second step is to create a prosecutorial firewall for political cases. This addresses the critical danger of politicization within the justice system itself.
Precisely. To prevent the politicization of justice, we need stronger guarantees around how high-profile political investigations and prosecutions are handled. One powerful idea is to give units like the DOJ's Public Integrity Section, which specifically investigates corruption by public office holders, statutory autonomy.
Make it independent.
Make it more independent, perhaps akin to an independent agency or even a permanent special prosecutor's office, insulated from direct political pressure from the Attorney General or the White House.
Okay, how would that work practically?
For instance, we could require that any decision to block or drop a sensitive case against a public official be reported to, say, a panel of judges or directly to Congress. This mechanism could effectively stop quiet firings of prosecutors or politically motivated case closures in sensitive probes, bringing sunlight into the process.
So transparency and oversight.
It's exactly. The recent dismantling of public integrity's gatekeeping role, where the rule requiring local federal prosecutors to consult the section was suspended, serves as a stark cautionary tale. It demonstrates that without such oversight, partisan appointees can indeed target enemies or spare allies unchecked.
So it's about making sure justice is blind, not biased. What other measures can ensure fairness in prosecution and prevent its weaponization?
An additional measure could be to implement fast-track judicial review for claims of selective prosecution.
Meaning,
if someone credibly alleges they're being prosecuted or investigated solely for political retaliation, courts should be able to intervene early and decisively, rather than letting a politically motivated case drag on for years, draining resources and ruining reputations.
Get a quick ruling on whether it's politically motivated.
Right. The core principle here is that no single attorney general or U.S. attorney should have free rein to twist the law against political opponents or to shield cronies.
Yeah.
We can maintain legitimate prosecutorial independence and guard against abuse by building in a bit of sunlight and external review for these politically sensitive matters.
Like a firewall.
Think of it exactly like building a robust firewall around the justice system, akin to advanced cybersecurity measures protecting vital digital systems to prevent political interference and assure impartiality. It's about building in structural safeguards.
The third actionable step is to secure elections through clear law. not executive whim, and to properly resource the umpires who oversee them. The idea of consistent rules seems crucial here.
This point is absolutely critical. The chaotic tug-of-war over Trump's 2025 election order, which was eventually halted by courts, powerfully underscored a vital lesson. Election rules simply shouldn't be made up on the fly by one person in the executive branch.
Right, stability is key for trust.
To prevent such instability, Congress should clearly clarify federal election standards and legislation. For example, if there's a national desire to set a uniform deadline for mail ballots nationwide, it should be thoroughly debated and passed through Congress, involving public input and the normal legislative process, not imposed via an executive order.
Let the lawmakers decide, not the president alone.
Exactly. Judge Casper's injunction against Trump's order explicitly noted that setting voter qualifications or deadlines is Congress's job, and the president cannot usurp it. Similarly, if voter ID or citizenship proof requirements are to be enacted, that's a debate for elected lawmakers with public input, not something a president can dictate overnight, changing the rules mid-game.
And what about the umpires, those neutral arbiters of the election process? You mentioned resourcing them.
Yes, we also need to properly fund the neutral arbiters of our elections, such as the Election Assistance Commission, or EAC. The EAC plays a crucial role in helping states with election security, auditing, and establishing best practices, yet it is perennially underfunded and understaffed.
So they need more support.
Definitely. A relatively modest investment here could yield huge dividends in terms of reliability, efficiency, and, critically, public trust in our electoral process. In essence, the strategy is twofold. Rely on stable, clear law, not last-minute executive edicts, for election rules, and significantly bolster the independent institutions that help keep elections fair and secure. This approach will dramatically reduce the odds of a future scenario where a leader attempts to change the rules mid-game and plunges the nation into a legal and constitutional crisis, or where states simply don't have the resources to run smooth, trustworthy elections.
Our fourth actionable step is about protecting press freedom from retaliation, a concern that emerged vividly during the last administration. How do we make sure journalists can do their job without fear of executive reprisal?
Indeed. Trump's move to exclude Associated Press reporters over that seemingly trivial naming spat revealed a significant gap. While the First Amendment prohibits outright government censorship, a vindictive executive can still subtly misuse access privileges to punish unfavorable coverage.
Right, the power over access.
To counter this, we need to establish clear rules, either through legislation or binding regulations, for press access to the White House and other federal officials. Criteria for granting and revoking press credentials should be standardized and, crucially, viewpoint neutral.
Viewpoint neutral, so it can't be based on whether the president likes their reporting.
Exactly. No more yanking a reporter's access simply because a president dislikes their tone, their line of questioning, or their terminology. It has to be based on objective, professional standards, not political whim.
And if an administration does try to bar a news outlet anyway, what immediate recourse should there be? We saw that judges did step in last time, but it took time and effort.
Precisely. If an administration does attempt to bar a news outlet, there should be an immediate avenue to appeal that decision in federal court, with the burden placed squarely on the government to prove a legitimate, non-retaliatory reason for the ban, like a genuine security threat, not just displeasure with coverage.
Put the onus on the government to justify it.
Right. Courts did step in to help AP in their case. A judge actually ordered the White House to restore AP's access, affirming that the government cannot shut its doors to journalists because of their viewpoints. However, this took valuable time and expensive litigation. Codifying these principles would proactively deter future abuses, setting clear boundaries from the start.
What about lawsuits against journalists?
Additionally, strengthening shield laws, which protect journalists from being forced to reveal sources, and anti-cell APP laws nationally would help protect journalists from being bogged down by frivolous lawsuits or legal threats designed simply to silence them for doing their job.
Anti-SLAPP, those are strategic lawsuits against public participation, right?
Exactly. Lawsuits purely meant to intimidate and drain resources. A free and independent press is like our societal immune system against tyranny. We need to treat it as such by making it legally bulletproof against official retaliation.
Fifth, we need to bar the use of immigration powers to quash dissent. This seems like a particularly insidious and novel tactic that we hadn't seen weaponized quite this way before.
It is indeed. One particularly novel and alarming tactic from the Trump II era was leveraging immigration enforcement to silence critical voices, essentially sending the message, If you're not a citizen, protest at your peril.
Chilling effect.
Massive chilling effect. This directly runs counter to core American values, as the First Amendment protects persons, not just citizens, in their free speech and assembly within U.S. borders. To prevent such a profound misuse of power, Congress should amend immigration law to categorically prohibit deporting or denying visa renewal to any individual based on their lawful expression of speech or assembly.
So separate their immigration status from their right to speak freely.
Completely. In practice, this would mean if an international student joins a peaceful campus protest or a foreign worker participates in a lawful demonstration, their immigration status cannot be jeopardized for that reason, period.
This sounds like a fundamental protection for free expression for everyone in the country, not just citizens, acknowledging that basic rights apply to all within the jurisdiction.
Exactly. Trump's January orders targeting foreign student protesters were a direct attack on free expression. And while courts would likely strike down the most blatant violations on constitutional grounds eventually, it's far better to explicitly legislate this protection to prevent the chilling effect in the first place.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Right. America can maintain robust vetting for genuine threats, such as incitement to violence or terrorism, without ever treating criticism or unpopular views as legitimate grounds for removal from the country. This reform would reassure millions of people, from student visa holders to asylum seekers, that they need not live in fear that simply speaking up could lead to their deportation. Authoritarians inherently try to divide the people into classes with different rights. Democracy, however, insists that fundamental freedoms apply to all within its borders, regardless of their passport or immigration status.
Our sixth actionable step focuses on ensuring funding decisions aren't weaponized. This seems like a subtle but powerful way to exert control by freezing grants or withholding federal monies.
It's a critical insight derived from recent experience. Trump's tenure revealed how profoundly funding levers can be weaponized. Freezing grants, canceling contracts, or withholding federal monies to coerce behavior from states, localities, or institutions he disagreed with politically.
Using money as a weapon.
Exactly. To counter this, lawmakers can create safe harbor funding streams that are explicitly insulated from political interference. For example, once Congress allocates money to a state or institution for a specific congressionally approved purpose, the executive shouldn't be able to arbitrarily put a hold on it due to unrelated policy disagreements or political grievances.
So, a system for checks on executive discretion in funding, preventing it from being used as a weapon. How would that work?
One way could be to require that any suspension of congressionally appropriated funds be reported and justified to Congress within, say, 30 days, and crucially, subject to a fast congressional override.
Sunlight and potential reversal by Congress.
Right. This would make stunts like Trump's reported freezes of university research funds, which targeted campuses he deemed too liberal, much harder to pull off quietly or without accountability. Similarly, for critical areas like disaster aid or law enforcement grants, Congress could set criteria in law for eligibility such that a president can't just tweet that he's denying aid to a Democrat city as punishment.
Objective criteria, not political whims.
Objective criteria. Inspectors General could also be specifically tasked with flagging any unusual delays or withdrawals of funds and requiring public explanation. The principle here is not to straitjacket genuine policy flexibility, but to prevent secret or capricious punishment via the purse strings. In short, sunlight and clear rules for federal funding decisions can help ensure they're based on law and merit, not the president's grievance of the day.
And finally, the seventh and perhaps broadest actionable step, building broad coalitions to defend core democratic norms. This acknowledges that policy fixes alone won't save democracy if the underlying cultural commitment isn't there to support them.
This is fundamental, really the ultimate defense mechanism. One of the strongest defenses against authoritarian drift is a cross-cutting coalition of groups that don't usually agree on everything, liberals and conservatives, businesses and unions, but do agree on certain rules of the game that are inviolable.
Finding common ground on the basics of democracy.
Exactly. This means actively encouraging alliances between, for example, pro-democracy conservatives and progressives, business leaders and labor unions, civil rights activists and veterans organizations, an array of constituencies united by a common bedrock commitment to constitutional order and civil liberty.
Can you give us an international example of where this kind of broad coalition has worked effectively?
Brazil provides a compelling recent illustration. In 2022, a broad front stretching from the left all the way to the center-right came together to oppose Jair Bolsonaro's anti-democratic moves and ultimately supported Lula in the election.
Even people who disagreed strongly on policy.
Yes. This included figures who ordinarily would never back a leftist candidate, but who agreed that democracy itself was on the line. They rose above their usual political divisions. This kind of unity, a shared commitment to the system, may well be needed in the U.S.
How might that manifest here?
It could manifest as a democracy defense compact in which major American institutions, religious groups, the business community, civic organizations, media, and others collectively pledge to reject violence, respect election results, and hold leaders accountable regardless of their party affiliation.
A public commitment.
A public commitment. It also means voters being willing, when necessary, to vote across party lines to defeat an obvious enemy of democracy, prioritizing the system over pure partisan loyalty.
And how effective are such coalitions in practice when faced with an authoritarian-leaning executive?
These coalitions that coordinate across sectors can effectively resist intimidation because the pressure becomes too broad for a regime to counter easily. For example, if a government tries to bully the press, but journalists, academics, businesses, and the public stand together in protest, the combined pressure can become too much for a regime to sustain its tactics. It raises the cost of repression.
So safety in numbers and diversity of support.
Exactly. The key nonpartisan red lines around which to unite might include an absolute rejection of political violence or paramilitaries, no illegal usurpation of power, such as ignoring election outcomes, and no blanket crackdowns on free expression.
The fundamental rules.
By loudly and visibly affirming these principles, a broad coalition makes it unequivocally clear that any leader who violates them will face a united wall of opposition. This can serve as a powerful deterrent to would-be authoritarians, or at least make their job significantly harder, by denying them the tacit consent or quiet acquiescence they often rely on. In the end, democracy is defended by people, not just rules. Cultivating a shared norm that we may disagree on taxes or immigration, but we are united in defending the Constitution and the process, is perhaps the most powerful antidote to backsliding.
What an incredible deep dive. We've covered a tremendous amount, from the quantifiable symptoms of democratic decline that show it's not just a feeling.
Right, the data.
To the subtle manipulation tactics employed by populist leaders and projected into plausible future scenarios for America based on these trends. This isn't just a theoretical exercise, it's a practical field guide, a cheat sheet for you, our listener, to use in understanding, observing, and engaging with the health of our democracy.
To quickly crystallize the core takeaways for your analytical mind, consider these points like flashcards for rapid recall of complex information.
Okay, the flashcard recap. Let's hear it.
First, the diagnostic red flags of backsliding. Election rules blitz, unilateral changes to election laws that courts repeatedly strike down. Retaliation against critics. State power used to punish media, businesses, academia, or immigrants for dissent.
Got it.
Forces turned inward. Domestic deployment and normalization of military or federal agents in policing roles.
Right.
Civil servant purges and immunity. Mass reclassification firing of apolitical staff paired with legal immunity for the powerful.
Okay.
Politicized justice.
Yeah.
Leaders positioned above the law with selective prosecutions or pardons for allies.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the populist manipulation playbook. Delegitimizing truth. Leaders claiming only they have the truth, dismissing experts and institutions.
Believe me.
Scapegoating. Vilifying groups to foster an us versus them mentality.
Divide and conquer.
Victim-hero complex.
Yep.
Leader as both savior and persecuted victim.
The paradox.
Encouraging violence. Tacitly or overtly endorsing violence against opponents.
Dangerous line.
Then, the future scenarios, trajectories. 10 years, 2035. Precarious hybrid democracy tools normalized.
Okay.
20 years, mid-2040s. Critical fork in the road, democratic renewal or competitive authoritarianism.
The big choice.
50 years, 2075. Divergent legacies, recommitted democracy, or entrenched authoritarianism.
Long-term path.
100 years, 2125. Profound global ripple effects, bulwark of freedom or cautionary tale.
Global impact.
And finally, the actionable interventions. Legislate civil service IG protections.
Protect the experts.
Create prosecutorial firewall.
Depoliticize justice.
Secure elections by law and resource umpires.
Stable rules, funded refs.
Protect press freedom from retaliation.
Shield the press.
Bar immigration powers to quash dissent.
Protect speech for all.
Ensure funding decisions aren't weaponized.
Stop money as punishment.
Build broad coalitions to defend norms.
Unite for democracy.
That's the cheat sheet in brief.
That's incredibly helpful. We've laid out the facts, the patterns, the potential futures, and the concrete steps. The message is clear. The United States is at a profound inflection point. The next 6 months to 6 years are truly determinative, not just for the U.S., but for the health of democratic systems worldwide.
The stakes are very high.
But these scenarios, as you said, are not destiny. You, our listener, armed with this knowledge, possess immense agency in this historical moment. By understanding these mechanisms, you are now better equipped to observe, analyze, and act.
That's the core takeaway, the practical application of this deep dive. So the question becomes, armed with this comprehensive field guide, how will you apply this heightened awareness in your daily observations of political discourse and institutional behavior? What responsibility do you now feel as an informed participant in safeguarding democratic norms, even in the smallest of interactions or decisions, knowing the stakes are so high?
A powerful question to leave us with. Knowledge truly is power. By understanding these patterns and having this comprehensive cheat sheet, you are now equipped to defend democracy in your time. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and engage meaningfully.
Couldn't agree more.